Welcome to AOL Bill, Sloane.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
By the way, this is one of the coolest people in New York City. I just want to say it off the bat. She's New York Times bestselling author. She's got books being optioned for movies.
This is
everything.
The biggest recipient of my mother's checks.
That's right. That's
so,
right.
That works out well.
But I want to tell everyone, Sloane and I actually go way back. We actually had a date together. It was not with each other. We were on a double date, and I married my date.
I did not marry my date.
She did not marry her date, so it worked out for one of us.
I know, but it was a half magical date.
It was a half magical date.
It was magical in the moment, and then you just extended the magic.
That's right.
Towards, a life.
I know. Do you remember anything from our double date?
Oh my gosh. Almost nothing. I remember.
That's the non-magical part of the date.
Well, that was the magical. It's like the Twilight Zone when you go back, the next day and the mysterious bookshop has disappeared. But let's see. What do I remember? I remember we were in some sort of fancy environment, and I was wearing uncomfortable shoes.
Oh.
That's it. That's all I remember.
And I had been. This is like my third week of dating my wife. So
yeah, you were just right.
Yeah.
So it really does feel like a sliding doors situation.
I know.
Where like at that moment, you were then on the trajectory towards the love of your life, and then I went on to date several more people in several more pairs of uncomfortable shoes.
But we'll find. Maybe we should have another double date again.
Yeah.
We'll recreate.
We'll redo the double date. We'll redo the double date.
Magical moment.
Anyway.
So you've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I told you earlier as I was preparing for this, there's like so many places we can go.
Right.
So
where
do you want to start?
Where do I want to start? Okay, well, we can start with a novel.
Let's start with a novel. So
we can work
Clash,
backwards.
just out in paperback now. Give it up for that.
Thank you. That is the first time anyone has ever applauded for a paperback book. We're making history right here.
I had this, so I actually, I went to a bookstore to get this book.
A real one.
And I had not been in one, I think now in years, and I just had this, it was actually kind of sad being in Barnes & Nobles.
Well, Barnes & Noble, it's interesting. I mean, we can also have a whole conversation about the publishing world. But Barnes & Noble, it's interesting because the publishing universe used to portray it as like this big, bad, evil entity. And now that Amazon is so huge and bookstores are dying out, they seem like your local independent record store.
Yeah. What was that movie with Tom Hanks where the big bookstore?
You've Got Mail.
You've Got Mail?
Yeah.
They need like a remake where...
Yeah.
Tom Hanks is now being put out of business by Jeff Bezos.
They already put him on an island and gave him Wilson the football or whatever. I'm going to say a bunch of wrong words. Those are not the, by the way, like I'll go home and I'll listen to this and I'll think where is your word retrieval gone? So go ahead.
I had a little moment this morning preparing for this interview that I thought related to this book. So my printer broke and I didn't know if I was going to be able to print out my notes. Well, I thought I could just be up here with my phone. But then I thought if I'm up here with my phone, people are going to look at me and think that I'm being rude and not paying attention to you.
Yeah.
So then I had this idea that I could have a note card and have it look like I had my notes on a card, but it would really be my phone. And then I went down this long trail of could I patent this idea? And then I looked online, and they had fake Bibles that you could put your phone in if you're in church. They had...
Oh my gosh, like the way people used to do with, like a gun or something. Like they dig out the Bible. And
they had a
like
salmon dish, so you could be at dinner, and it looked like you were eating salmon, but it was really hiding your phone.
Why is salmon...
I have no idea.
Objectively better than texting.
But it just
These
got
are the
me,
questions I ask myself as I fall asleep.
But it just got me thinking about appearances because so much of this book is about trusting appearances. So watch that.
Okay.
Watch that connection right there.
That was a magnificent
And how
segue.
obsessed I was about keeping up appearances. And a lot of this book is really focused on that.
Yes.
And was that a topic that was in your head before you even found the subject of the book, or did that sort of flow from your research on it?
It was sort of a combination. I mean, I think that frequently you get asked what was the inspiration for this book, and there's this pressure to cite, one amazing moment when you thought, okay, that's it, I'm writing a novel about this. But it happens more organically than that, and it was sort of a Venn diagram of two things.
I like that you just threw in Venn diagram.
Venn diagram. I can even physically.
You could tell she's taught before.
But where the first was basically to explore this age. So the book is a love triangle, essentially, between two guys and a girl. who had gone to college together, and now they have been estranged for about 10 years, and they reunited at a wedding. And so I wanted to capture that age when you feel like you should have accomplished more than you probably have, and you're sort of acting as if in front of certain members of your friends. So in that sense, you're keeping up appearances, but you're also sort of lost. You're not even sure what the appearances are you're supposed to be keeping up. You're like, am I supposed to be, it's noon. Should I be changing diapers, or should I be drinking, or both? It's anyone's game.
Yes.
And then the other thing I really wanted to do with this novel, and I had written nonfiction, so I wanted to have some fun with it, was to really write a tribute novel to the art of the short story. And so I picked a short story that I really loved, that I felt had all these themes that mirrored what my very contemporary characters were going through, and that's The Necklace by Guy de Maupassant, which a lot of people have read, even if you don't realize it. You probably read it in like an anthology in like 7th or 8th grade. And that is a short story about keeping up appearances, and it's a short story about class and love and striving and going after false goals, which is what all these characters do. And I just realized that it is a comedy, though. Like, that sounds very depressing, but it's a comedy.
And you said that short story is misunderstood.
I do think it's misunderstood, because what happens is in the short story, and one of the characters becomes obsessed with the short story, but in it, there's a woman who basically really wants to be part of upper crust society, and she loses her way, and she decides to borrow a necklace from her rich neighbor, and then she loses the necklace, and she spends the rest of her life paying it off, buying a replacement necklace, and then at the very end of the story, she runs into the rich woman, and it's years later, and the woman says, "Oh my gosh, you look terrible." And our heroine says, well, and explains what happened with a little bit of pride, saying, well, this is what I did. I begged, borrowed, and stealed and replaced the necklace. And the rich lady looks at her and says, oh, my dear, it was fake. It was never real. See, it's very upsetting.
Yeah,
it's a very upsetting
sad
story. And what's weird is that story normally gets interpreted, sorry for the quick run through of that, but it normally gets interpreted as this tragic story for her. But I think it's a tragic story for her husband, who does everything he can to procure this invite to this fancy party where she wears the necklace, and her first reaction, instead of thank you, is, well, what am I going to wear to this? And then she borrows this necklace. She's kind of a brat about it. And then he goes down with her. He also has to work off all these debts and borrow from loan sharks or whatever he has to do. So I think the story is sort of misinterpreted. I still think it's tragic. I just think it's a matter of whose tragedy it is.
And so these three characters in this love triangle, where I guess you get asked this a lot, but where do they come from? Like, are there parts of them that are you? Are they parts of them that are people you know? Like, what was the inspiration for these three very sort of distinct archetypes? Is that the right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, so you have these three characters. So as a brief introduction to them, you have the girl, his name is Kezia, which is a weird name, but it's after a short story, because there's lots of little Easter eggs in the book for short story fanatics. And she is just sort of this hardworking, she works for a jewelry designer in the meatpacking district. She's hardworking, but she's also got a little undercurrent of negativity to her, because she's been so nice to everybody for so long, she's sort of about to crack. And then you have Victor, who's this Eeyore-esque sad sap guy who doesn't get the girl, gets his apartment broken into, sort of Job-esque, everything short of locusts. And then there's Nathaniel, who's very much in love with Nathaniel. And I think we all know someone like that, and he's a screenwriter in LA. And so each of these three people, I feel like I kind of know them, but they're not based on a specific person. The more minor characters are based on specific people.
Specific people?
Yeah.
Anyone that we, at our date that night?
No.
No?
No one on the date. No, there's...
Too bad.
Yeah, there is that fencing character.
Who's such an asshole.
He's such an asshole. He just comes by. There's the party scene, as you're well aware, where there's just a fencer in the background, and nobody can figure out why.
Why he's there.
And it's you. But no, that's that. So because in a way, they are inspired by real life. You live in the world. Like, there's the sort of gestalt of your experience that then gets imbued into the novel, of course. But after a while, once you spend a certain couple hundred pages with them, they become their own people.
So I want to talk a little about your life, and I also want to fire off a bunch of random things at you. So in regards to your life, so we get asked as Olympians a lot to tell our Olympic story. But we, by the way, both born in '78. She's August 3rd, right?
Yes.
I'm July 29th, so birthday's coming up. We get asked 5 things about our Olympic journey. So like, what were our pivotal moments that sort of led us to become Olympians, right? What were like our leap of faith moments where we like quit a job and traveled to Romania to have dogs run after us to compete, whatever the moment is. What was the moment you almost gave up and kept going? And then what did it feel like when you're on the podium? I'll relate this to being an author, don't worry. And then is there really that much sex in the Olympic Village?
Oh, God.
Okay, so First of all, 5 bands.
Please keep the last question as is, and I'll do my best to answer.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought you'd have fun with that one.
Okay, so first one.
Pivotal childhood moments that led you to become
Pivotal childhood moments.
an author, growing up in
Well, I
Westchester.
think that, wow, again, it's funny because for Olympians, you probably have a moment where you've won something specific, or you have this concrete moment where you are, an 1/8 of a second faster than everybody else in the world, and that's how you know, and it's more like math in that sense. Whereas I think for artists, it tends to be a little like wonky. But I would say, I guess, the first short story I ever wrote, I wrote for my parents to try to express something that I felt like I was not expressing in normal conversation, which is I had a learning disability as a child, and they kept helping me so much with my homework and sort of watching over me like hawks. And I wanted them to get off my back and let me try for myself. And so that message wasn't coming across in just normal everyday language. So I wrote them a sort of allegorical short story about bunny rabbits. And there's this family of bunnies. And one day the parents go out to get carrots, and then the parents get shot.
Ooh.
I know. It's so dark. It wasn't meant to be. And then the little baby bunny starves because it doesn't know how to get its own carrots.
How old were you when you wrote this? 3? How old were you?
27.
27.
No, I think I was like 7 or 8.
See.
It was illustrated, so it made it less creepy or more creepy.
No, I think that's more creepy.
It's not like the bunnies had X's through their eyes.
Did you have to explain it to your parents, or did they get it?
They got it.
They were like, "This
loud
is
and
you getting
clear.
murdered."
But you got the sense that, I guess the lesson in my lesson is that writing can be used to achieve things that nothing else can.
If you wrote that today, you would be like in a psych ward probably.
Well, no, I'd probably get like the Booker Prize.
Yeah, or that, or one or the other. See, that's like a story Olympians have about their childhood.
Yeah.
So what was the moment that you like took the plunge to really become an author?
I think, it happened gradually because I had this day job in publishing for so long, but I quit to write the novel about 6 years ago. But I was writing nonfiction before then. I had 2 collections of essays. I was told there'd be cake, and how did you get this number? And normal titles. And I think the first time I really felt like I was an author, which is how I'm going to answer that question, was, or not an author, but that the world had given me some sort of permission that you shouldn't need, but it was helpful, I was on book tour for my first book, and I was looking at the New York Times bestseller list, and I saw my name and the title of my book, and you're used to seeing your name.
Yeah.
So it didn't register at first. I'm like, yep, that's it, that's my name. And then it sunk in, and I was in an internet cafe in Seattle, hello. And I started screaming and crying, and the barista bought me a pumpkin vegan muffin.
See, that was your podium moment, actually, I think.
It was a pumpkin moment. But yeah, that was an insane feeling.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you feel like they're like this on the podium, but you know that you're not fully appreciating it in the moment. You're trying to tell yourself. There's like a little voice that's like, is this happening? Is this happening?
Is this real?
Right.
It doesn't seem real.
Record it for all the times you're like in bed in pajamas and like eating pizza and wondering where your life has gone wrong. Like record it. Sorry.
I love it.
Next question.
A time that you faced a big challenge kind of on the road to becoming an author, and what kept you going?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think trying to write a novel when you've never written a novel before. And I work better, speaking of Olympians, sort of, I work better under pressure. And I work better if circumstances are slightly difficult. So I quit my job without a book contract. And at first, the novel was so long. I just couldn't decide which story I wanted to tell. And there were all these backstories, and I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Wonder Boys or read the book. There's a great bit where Katie Holmes says, you know how her character says, you know how you're always telling us that writing is about making choices. Well, it seems like you didn't make any because she's looking at a 1,000-page manuscript. And I felt like having to cut out what was eventually 200 pages of this book.
Wow.
You're welcome, everyone, to make it shorter and faster and more interesting and funnier. That was a really tough thing to do because that is essentially throwing out like a year and a half of your life.
Wow. Yeah. Do people tell you you're crazy when you quit your job and say you're going to write a book? Because that's what they do when you're like quitting your job and you're like, I'm going for the Olympics. They're like, okay.
But what I really want to do is direct.
Yes.
Well, I think for the Olympics, they tell you that because it's an even more narrow loop to slip through. I mean, as hard as it is to get a book published, I think that there are less people who have won Olympic medals. I don't know the statistics. I'm going to say yes.
I don't know. I think it's pretty tough to do what you do.
But I mean, I don't know. With the addition of luge, maybe it's possible. But yes, no. So I don't. I worked in book publishing, so it wasn't that crazy. And I had 2 books out already by the time I sort of jumped from one lily pad to the other. So I wasn't perceived as that crazy, at least not for that.
And finally, is there really that much sex in the Olympic Village?
Yes. There is. There is.
There is.
One word.
One
Solemn.
word.
That's it.
That's a question we always get asked no matter what. We give a motivational speech, and then they're like, questions, please?
Really?
And the first question's like, is there really that much sex in the Olympic Village? And you're like, sure, yeah.
Well, because you like to think of it as like the United Nations or like We Are the World or even as something as basic as a Coke commercial with like every person, like the best representatives, these incredibly in shape people from, these like driven in shape with it people from all over the world.
Yeah, when I was engaged to my wife, I was at the London Olympics, and every story on TV was about sex in the Olympic Village. So she would call me all worried, and I would just joke with her. I'm like, hey, honey, I got to run. I got to go join like the orgy outside right now.
Yeah.
And just like messing with her.
It's like eyes wide shut with skis.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I want to fire off like a bunch of topics at you.
Sure.
And I need like another hour for some of these. But this is like, you're the most fascinating. You're fascinating.
Really? Thank you. I
All right.
feel like I babbled in the beginning of this interview. I apologize.
Me
Go
too.
ahead.
We just babble together. It's fine.
Good. In unison.
So, okay, you have a best-selling book, but you also penned a book under a pseudonym. That was your porn star name.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Should we clarify that slightly for my mother?
That you have a bad porn star name. Well, give us the 20
Do you know how to
second.
the way to get your porn star name, obviously the scientific formula is it's your first pet and then the first street that you grew up on. So obviously it's meant to produce like Bunny Fieldstone or something like that, or Fluffy something. But mine is Sky Chatham, which my name is already incredibly waspy, and I'm a Jew, and it's so funny. Even my porn star name is waspy. It's like I can't escape it. But it was sort of this epistolatory book that's all emails between a couple whose relationship falls apart. It's called Read Bottom Up. But, yeah.
And why did you decide to go the route of a pen name?
It's so incredibly different from the Clasp. I mean, there's similar, things about relationships and similar dialogue things, but it was a much lighter, much breezier thing than I've ever written before. And also, frankly, as a woman, the second you pick up a pen, people think you're writing chick lit. So this was something that is so thoroughly closer to that I wanted to both distance myself from it a little bit, but also have a lot of fun with it and be free with it.
Okay, you also have a blog called Sad Things on the Street.
Yes, Sad Stuff on the Street.
Sad Stuff on the Street.
.com
if you want to check it out. And it is literally that, correct?
It is what it sounds like. Have you ever seen like Stuff on My Cat? There's no dolphins on that. Like it's sad stuff on the street that people photograph, and it's become quite international. People photograph stuff. Yemen, Russia, all these places.
I think everyone should go to that website right now.
It's really weird. It's what it sounds like. Website is a really big word for Tumblr page, though.
Can I contribute? Can people contribute?
Yes.
To it? I'm gonna find you something
Please.
sad on the street.
Yes, the more the merrier.
So the title of your book, I Was Told There'd Be Cake, is not a story in the book, and I know you've been asked about this, but is there a story, I Was Told There'd Be Cake, or is there a story behind it that you haven't written?
Oh, that's interesting. No, I actually have not been asked that specific question.
Only on AOL.
It captured the theme of disappointment, which is allegedly the theme of the first essay collection. You have to have a theme or they arrest you. But so it allegedly captures that kind of feeling. And it's one of these titles, the way I get all my titles is they pop into my head and I think, I can't call it that. And then I call it that.
And you call it that?
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. All right, last fire-off question.
Okay.
So the book has been optioned for a movie,
Yes.
and you are actually writing the screenplay.
Not right now, but yes.
Not right now, but what has that experience been like? How is the book going to be different or similar? Have you written a screenplay before?
I've written some pilots and some screenplays before. I've written a couple pilots for HBO that didn't go, and I did write a screenplay just for myself a while ago. It goes much faster, but it's a lot of fun because you get to revisit these people that you kind of miss. Like I said before, they actually do become your invisible friends, which is sad when you're a child and really commendable when you grow up and you're a writer. And they become this sort of these people living in your mind, and I really wanted to revisit them, and writing dialogue is one of my favorite things to do, so it's fun.
So we're going to go to audience questions.
Okay.
I got my one last question for you, though, just about the screenplay. Have they asked you to add any characters to make the book better as a movie? And
Well, yeah, they all get abducted by aliens.
they all get abducted by aliens.
Yeah,
We're talking Michael Bay is going to direct it.
It's a comedy of manners in the vein of Whit Stillman that ends with giant explosions.
I'm looking forward to the movie version of the book.
Thanks.
All right, let's go to the audience. How are you?
Hey, Sloane.
Hi.
I'm so excited to read this.
Oh, thank you.
Do you keep a journal, or how do you keep track of? You said you write things down, but can you talk a little more about that?
Oh, sure. I don't keep a journal. I actually am envious of people who do. I feel like I need all my creative thoughts. They don't go into some sort of self-cycling machine. They end up going into notes for stories or for essays. But I do tend to write things down every day. Sometimes, annoyingly, I'll only have my phone on me, and I just look like I'm texting it to myself. But yeah.
That's why you need.
That's why I need. I know. I really.
A Bible or
that
a
was
note
on a
card.
silver platter. I'm like,
I
Tim, your
know.
invention.
We gotta
I
do
just
it.
need a salmon-covered phone.
She's eating salmon on the train. What is she doing?
I don't know.
All right, go ahead. Oh, we got two. Let's go back there, and then we'll go up here.
Hi, I want to know, who are some of your favorite writers?
Oh, this is a great question. It gets it off me onto something I love talking about. Zadie Smith, Jim Shepard is amazing if you've never read his stuff. Murakami, Philip Roth, you can't go wrong, except if the phone is covered in liver, then you can go wrong. But those are also short story authors like Laurie Moore. And for nonfiction, I would say David Rykoff, the late David Rykoff, who was a friend and very talented.
In front. We didn't forget about you.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I love the design of your book. Like the cover, it's amazing.
Thank you.
What was it like designing it?
Oh,
process?
my gosh. Not a question for me. A wonderful designer named Kelly Blair did it, and then, she designed it, and then the actual material is an artist who does stuff in toile, and the publishing house designed it, so it's not my doing. Thank you, though.
Thanks for being here as well.
Thanks.
I was wondering, do you have a particular spot where you just love to write, where just everything comes out?
Yes, and unfortunately, it's my bed. Because then you end up, that's how you stay up and stay in bed all day. But that is within my apartment, that's where it is. It's like you give yourself, it's like a child that only plays with a cardboard box. I'm like, I have the desk, and I have like a computer and a desktop and this fancy chair, and my bed is where I end up writing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Sloane, it's been awesome. As I told you, I could go
you.
3 hours. I got 50 more questions, so we'll have to do this again.
We'll catch
but
up.
If people want to catch you, you have your book tour coming up. Where do they go to find your dates?
SloaneCrosley.com. Excellent question.
Excellent question. We
Good
got to get that in
publicist
there.
your next life.
She's a New York Times bestselling author. She's going to have movies out. She's got best-selling books. She's got paperbacks out. She just started writing for Vanity Fair.
She sings, she dances.
She sings, she dances, and hopefully I'll be in the screenplay. You should add a fencer. I highly recommend
Definitely.
it. Sloane Crosley, AOL Bill.
Thank you.